Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to change the view so I can see everybody. Yeah, that's it. That's better. That's better. Yeah, so this is always an interesting session. We do it about once a year because things change. And certainly things have changed over the last few years. So well worthwhile having some people with us that are experts to answer our questions. So tonight we have with us Terra. Let's wave Terra.
Hello.
Terra's with World Nomads, and she is our international US and adventure travel expert. And we have Pamela Langevin from MediQuote, and she's our Canadian expert. And unfortunately, Stan Sandberg, who is with travelinsurance.com and was with us last year, got COVID today. So he is down, but hopefully not out, and he's just going to bounce back and get healthy really fast. He was going to cover the US situation, but because World Nomads is an international organization, Tara's going to cover the US questions. So I think we're well covered here. The last time we ran this session, I asked the same questions to both the Canadian and the US expert at the same time. And we then got into a compare and contrast scenario. And I felt that it wasn't as clear as I wanted it to be. So this time, what's going to happen is that I'm going to ask the questions about US travel insurance first, then talk about the implications for adventure travelers, and then talk about the Canadian travel insurance situation, and then ask both Tara and Pamela questions that are kind of emerging issues around travel insurance that are not quite as technical, but just kind of trend type of things. So, so that's kind of the lay of the land. So let's get started. So I'm happy to introduce Tara, and I am going to read the bio. I haven't got it memorized. She's Senior Marketing Manager at World Nomads, overseeing marketing strategy and activities for the Americas. But she came from an advertising area, which is why she's in marketing. But since joining World Nomads, she has learned about the industry through professional training, insurance licensing, and conversations with underwriters and actuaries. So well-versed in travel insurance information. So welcome, Tara. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Well, it's good. We're going to move quickly because we have lots of questions, but at the same time, you know, feel free to answer completely so that people get the information they need. So one of the things that I have noticed, and so I'm going to ask this question of both Tara and Pamela, is that Americans and Canadians look at travel insurance very differently. So I want to ask you, what kind of travel insurance is most important for Americans to buy? What are the, and then of course, what are the bells and whistles that are attached to it? But what is the focus for Americans in terms of travel insurance?
Yeah, and I don't think that I can advise on one specific travel insurance policy to be the best fit for every single American traveler. It really does depend on the specific traveler and their travel plans. But I can say that for Americans, there are three main areas of coverage to consider. Number one, protecting yourself while you're traveling. Number two, protecting your stuff. And number three, protecting your investment. So when it comes down to the areas of coverage to look at, for protecting yourself, if anything were to happen to you before the trip or during trip, look for emergency medical, emergency dental coverages, as well as 24/7 emergency assistance. Protecting your stuff, you want to look for coverages regarding delayed baggage, baggage and equipment, if anything were to be damaged, lost, or stolen. And then protecting your investment. So making sure that your hard-earned vacation, the money that you put into flights, accommodations, activities doesn't go to waste. So look to trip cancellation, trip interruption, and trip delay benefits. That's pretty standard. There are bells and whistles, like you mentioned. So CFAR coverage, which stands for coverage for any reason, has become very popular in the past couple of years with COVID. So you're able to get a higher amount of coverage, and essentially you could cancel your trip without necessarily having a sickness or some of these perils that we typically look like with traditional travel insurance policies. It is a bit more expensive, but some people opt for CFAR coverage. You can also get riders for high value items, adventure activities, which we'll go into. And another consideration, depending on what kind of traveler you are, is if an annual multi-trip policy is appropriate. If you're traveling a lot and you don't necessarily want to take out individual policies each time you're leaving the country or even traveling domestically outside of your home base, it is a consideration.
Yeah, the annual plan, certainly before COVID, was the direction that I went into because I traveled so frequently, but now it's not been what I've done. So it really depends. The other thing, when I think of the annual plan, when I would purchase it, I would purchase it coincidental with my travel plans. So if, for example, I've come back from a trip and it's just lapsed my policy, I would delay the purchase until it was necessary again. So rather than be paying for time that I would not be traveling anyways. But that does lead to a question in terms of the time to buy travel insurance. I mean, when I was like in my 20s and 30s, it would be like, oh yeah, I'm on the way out to the airport. It's like, get travel insurance. But now I think that there is probably a more astute way of doing things. What is the time from your perspective?
Yeah, I always urge people to buy their travel insurance after they start making investments in their travels. So once you buy your flights, accommodations, or really put any money down for your trip, that's a good time to buy the travel insurance. Just bake it into that purchase flow. Just add it as another kind of check mark on that list when you're booking your plans. I've heard so many stories where, people try to purchase travel insurance after the hurricane is named or after they've already experienced a flight delay, and it just doesn't work like that.
Right. Yeah. Now, World Nomads in particular, you can purchase after you've departed, but not after there has been a declaration of a hurricane.
Exactly. So you can purchase World Nomads travel insurance policies while you're already traveling, and you could purchase it on a plane if you've upgraded and you have the Wi-Fi connection. There are waiting periods though. So there would be a 24-hour waiting period before certain coverages go into effect. So that's important to understand. But yes, I think with many policies now here in the US, you are able to purchase while you're abroad or already traveling.
Okay. Yeah, that was not very common before. So I gather that it is gaining steam.
Yes, it has become more common, but I have to say just quickly on that, I think that a lot of travelers in both the US and Canada are becoming more savvy to the pre-trip cancellation benefits. So we are seeing those lead times extend. So more travelers are buying further out from their trips because they realize people have gotten burned over the past couple of years. So they realize that there is benefit to booking ahead of time.
Right. And that's that piece of securing, your investment.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
By booking your travel insurance as you are investing in your trip in whatever way that it is.
Yes.
So now the tricky stuff that some people find, which is the whole issue of pre-existing conditions, what's a minor ailment, what's a major ailment. And what do we have to notify the insurance providers of? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so again, this is going to vary, but generally a pre-existing condition is going to be an ongoing medical or dental condition that's either investigation by, say, a doctor, dentist, or chiropractor, or something, or you've already experienced symptoms of the condition and you're aware of them before you purchase a policy. In some cases, there are specific time periods that policies will set. So if you've had this condition for the past 60 days, some might be 180 days. So that's something that's going to vary by insurer and policy. So something to look into. Not all insurers are going to ask for that information before you purchase. For example, with World Nomads, we don't ask to know your pre-existing conditions, but we lay out in the benefits table that we don't cover pre-existing conditions.
Right, and that's a very common thing. In Canada, I've seen, some providers have a detailed medical form and some don't, right? But a lot of the US that I've looked at has no medical form. So that then requires the individual to dig into the terms and conditions to know what is a pre-existing condition for that product, for that insurance product. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And stabilization periods, can you describe what that is?
Sorry, I don't think I could speak to that one.
Maybe it's a terminology. Maybe that's what's used in Canada. But the notion that if you have a pre-existing condition, but you've been stable for a certain period of time, therefore, so for example, medications have not changed and things of that nature, sometimes then it's not considered a pre-existing condition. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Unfortunately, I don't think I have the knowledge to speak to that specific circumstance.
Okay, well, it is something that I've read about. So to look for a stabilization period is important. So for example, I can give myself as an example, actually. I have epilepsy that is well managed. And, but I did have a medication change. And then just over 6 months later, I was taking a trip. So this was in 2021. And the fact that I had gone past that 6 months meant that I was stable. But so even if medication is reduced because you're so healthy, they've lowered your blood pressure med, that can be considered unstable. So have a look into that side of things in terms of you know, whether it's considered pre-existing or pre-existing stable, and therefore you're covered. So
can I jump in with a couple questions?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so before we get too far past this question, the subject of how close to your trip you can purchase insurance, how is it more expensive? Kobe is asking, is it more expensive if you leave it later, or is it the same price?
In the case of World Nomads policy, it would be the same price. We don't have, some insurers do price differently depending on when you buy the policy, but for ours, we don't.
Okay. And this is a question, now this is a big question or a complicated question. So it's possible that it's something we might want to leave until later, but I just want to put it out here. Victoria is asking, what does separate travel insurance offer beyond what a gold or platinum credit card or travel insurance that's part of private health insurance? What more do you get, or what's better about having separate specific travel insurance?
Tracy, I think I'd like to leave that question to the end so that both Pamela and Terra can answer that, because I think it's going to apply across the board for sure.
Okay.
And it's an interesting question.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And this one last one for the moment. Susan is asking if World Nomads covers reimbursement for business class tickets if a flight is canceled.
It depends. That's the typical kind of insurance answer. Yes, in some cases, I mean, the first class, whether it's first class economy, that's not the problem. It's really down to the policy with the airline. The first step would be going to the airline. If it is non-refundable and marked as a non-refundable cost, and you are able to provide that documentation, then yes, we have had cases in the past where we're able to offer a reimbursement for that cost.
Great, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Okay, so back to my little list here. COVID. Is it safe to say now that just about every policy is covering COVID in one way or another?
Not necessarily. I think it's still important to look for COVID coverages. A lot of insurers are now, they've, put videos, articles, infographics about COVID cover across their website. So it's really easy to get that information. But there are still insurers that aren't necessarily covering COVID. And I think the big thing to look out for is this term pandemic exclusion. And some insurers have a pandemic exclusion, meaning once an illness is labeled as a pandemic, it's excluded from coverage. So if you were to get sick with this because it's a pandemic, you wouldn't necessarily get the coverages. So it's something to look out for. I think the majority of insurers now over the past couple of years have updated products to be able to have some benefits for COVID cover, if it's, whether it's emergency medical or even something like trip cancellation. But yes, I mean, it's still very, alive and real. So something to look out for when you're purchasing a travel insurance policy.
Okay. And so you mentioned trip cancellation and emergency medical. What if you're in a situation where you have to isolate and extend your trip by 5 days, which is going to incur extra expenses? Is that something that's typically covered in COVID insurance, or is that something, again, that you need to look out for?
Yeah, that would be another one to look out for. In some cases, insurers will cover that under something like trip interruption. If you are unable to continue your trip because you need to quarantine, you would get assistance with, rebooking any of your flights, or say extending the cost of a hotel or accommodation that you're staying at.
Okay. Okay, so about price, cost of travel is going up.
Yes.
Is that affecting the cost of travel insurance?
Yeah, certainly. I think, prices are going up for travel. In some cases, the cost of travel is very much tied to the price that you're paying for a travel insurance policy. Just about everything around us is going up in price due to inflation. But I think that the important thing to remember with travel insurance is that it is a low cost insurance given the benefits. So it's what we call an aleatory contract, meaning that there's an unequal exchange of value. So you could get a policy for a 1-week trip to Mexico for around $100 to $150. So that's a small price to pay for, a circumstance that the insurance company would end up paying for emergency medical, trip cancellation. So we've had cases where people get sick and end up in the hospital with, tens of thousands of dollars of hospital bills. So if you think about it in the long term, it can be a big savings.
Yeah, well, yes, I have claimed multiple times for different things. And I cannot say that I have necessarily recovered everything, every cent I've spent in terms of premiums, certainly not. But I have certainly appreciated being able to make the claims. It's been very helpful. And there are times when, so I'll say, like when I was in France and sprained my ankle, the claim I made was probably less than the premium, right? But it's because the medical coverage there is so cheap. However, if it had been a more serious problem, if I had broken my leg, that's a different game. I would have been in hospital and things of this nature. So it's like with all insurance, right? You are insuring yourself from the potential. So.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to keep in mind with the price too is, the regulation is very is very tough in, at least here in the US. I know up in Canada too. But the insurance regulators don't just allow insurance companies to increase prices without seeing added benefits for the consumers. So a lot of times when insurance companies do decide to increase prices, they're also looking for additional values, whether it be non-insurance services or, increased benefits limits, so that they're adding value at the same time that they might be raising prices.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions for how to keep the cost of travel insurance down?
I mean, I think shopping around is a good option. This would have been a really good conversation for travel insurance. Yeah, exactly. Travelinsurance.com. But yeah, just shopping around and understanding what kind of coverage you actually might might need, because in some cases you might not need, a comprehensive policy. You might just be looking for trip cancellation or emergency medical. So understanding your needs and what's available in the market can help.
Yeah, and that's certainly, where travelinsurance.com does excel, is that, you put in your parameters and out pops a whole list, and you can purchase according to your specific, areas of concern. But
Yep.
at World Nomads is quite different, because when I put in my criteria or my situation into your search function, I end up with two options. I end up with a standard plan and explorer plan. And this is where we get into kind of the adventure traveler side of things. So what is the basic difference between these two plans?
Yeah, so the plans that World Nomads offers are both comprehensive. So our standard plan is the baseline plan. It includes benefits such as trip cancellation, emergency medical, baggage and equipment coverage. The Explorer plan has all of the benefits that the standard plan does, but it has a few more, and it's tiered at a higher price point. So the two main differences would be some of the benefits limits. So typically with something like trip cancellation, you're going to see a higher benefits limits on the Explorer plan versus a standard plan. The Explorer plan also has a wider suite of adventure activity coverage. So World Nomads really does have like kind of a niche in the adventure travel space, because we cover over 150 adventure activities. With the Explorer plan, there are higher risk activities that are covered compared to standard.
Can you give us some examples of the activities?
Yeah, sure. So any kind of hiking, camping, trekking, bouldering up to 7,000 meters, the standard plan will only cover you up to 6,000 meters. There's backcountry skiing, heli skiing, which has been very popular. I was in Denver last week and met somebody who went on a heli skiing trip. Even something like cave diving, cave scuba diving, and shark cave diving. Those would be covered only under the Explorer plan.
Okay, so as one is looking at insurance, they also have to keep in mind what they're planning to do. So I might be traveling independently or on a tour, and the tour happens to have diving with sharks or whatever, right? Cage diving there. Then that would be something that I would have to make sure that I up the right. And I notice it's not a big difference. It's not a huge price difference between the two.
Right.
Yeah.
I happened to notice when I was researching for tonight that I read that a lot of people don't know that one of the things you need to consider when you're looking for insurance is that if you're going somewhere, you might not consider yourself an adventure travel, but if you're going somewhere to participate in a sport or say to run a marathon or something, that you need to look at what is covered, because you may not be covered if you're participating in a sport, which you might not think of as adventure travel.
Yes, yeah, that is correct. So even the low risk activities are sometimes excluded. And that's one of the differentiators we'll get into when we talk about something like credit card coverage versus a travel insurance policy.
Okay,
Right.
Good point. Good point. Okay, and finally, World Nomads does have age limits. So travelinsurance.com will cover people up to just about any age. But World Nomads does have age limits, and I believe they're different for Canada and the US.
Yes, so for the US, the age limit is 69, and Canada, it is 65.
Right. So that's just important to note.
Yes.
So, okay. Right. Okay. So I think that covers. Have I missed anything, Tara, that you think that I should have asked that you want to get out there?
No, I don't think so. But if anything comes up, I'm happy to answer questions and chime in.
Good. Good. Sounds great. So I'm going to turn to Pamela. Pamela Langevin is an insurance broker with MediQuote. So the notion of a broker, Pamela would, my understanding is, represent a number of different travel insurance companies, suppliers, and help you choose the right one for you.
That's correct.
Okay, good, good. So specializing in medical coverage for travelers to and from Canada, including students traveling abroad. So you covered the range there. So Pamela, thank you for joining us. And I'm going to repeat some of the questions are going to be similar, but we'll find out what happens with the answers, I guess. So what kind of travel insurance is most important to Canadians when they're buying the best bells and whistles?
In the past, Canadians focused a lot on the medical coverage, emergency medical, protecting themselves more than anything else. Recent travel issues with airports and airlines, we've noticed a large increase in the number of Canadians wanting the trip cancellation and interruption, protecting the investment that on their trip as well as their baggage. And that's been a big increase in this year alone. But typically Canadians focus on their health, where they're protecting their beings.
Right. Yeah, that was certainly my understanding. Yeah. What is the best time to buy travel insurance?
In Canada, you can purchase your policy typically up to 6 months in advance of travel with the medical coverage. For trip cancellation and interruption, you can purchase up to a year, year and a half in advance. That type of policy you want to purchase when you've made a financial investment. Some policies, if you want the cancel for any reason clause, you have a time restriction where you have to purchase within 7 days of your initial booking, and then you can get that cancel for any reason clause. For the medical policy, personally, we ask for 3 days to get a policy issued because there can be some surprises in the application process. Our companies definitely ask a lot of health questions. And if there's a surprise in one of your answers, it may mean we have to switch insurance providers or take a look at a different policy. So we like a few days notice for sure.
Okay, but that's very, actually, I'd not heard that before. The notion that a year, year and a half for your investment, but 6 months for the medical.
Correct.
That's very interesting. And what about the pre-existing condition and minor ailment concepts in Canada? How do those play out?
Canadian policies will cover pre-existing conditions as long as they meet the definition as stable, as you were indicating earlier. Stable means that the medical condition has not had any test results showing it's gotten any worse. There's been no adjustment in the medication dosage, either up or down, no stopping a medication, starting a new medication, or change in the usage of that medication. If you're taking a medication once a day and it disagrees with you and the doctor says, you know what, cut that dosage in half, take half in the morning, half at night, that could constitute a change depending on which insurance provider you're looking at. As long as the definition of stable is met, some policies want you to be stable 1 full year, some 6 months, some 3 months, and we even have policies with stable periods as short as 30 days or 7 days. Of course, the shorter the stability period you're looking for, the higher the premium is. But it does allow some individuals who've had a very recent change to still get coverage for that condition.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I purchase insurance 6 months out, and then a month before I depart, something gets changed. So I would then need to inform you of a change,
Yes.
I would assume, right?
Absolutely. Any changes that occur either in your travel dates or in your health, we do say give us a call. Many times, we get a call and the individual says this has occurred. And the best news we can give you is, oh, that's great. That meets the minor ailment clause, meaning it's something that is a prescription of 10 days or less, no more than 1 follow-up visit, and the treatment will be over at least a month before you go. That doesn't affect your policy. But if you've had a change to another condition that does affect your policy, then we have time to change the application to make sure all your answers are still correct and go for a shorter stability period if you need coverage for that condition.
Okay, so would that then be tied to the policy that I purchased originally, or could you shop that at that point?
Absolutely not. You're not tied to that policy until it starts with the medical coverage. So if you have purchased a policy today, for example, but your departure date is November 15th, you have until November 14th to make any necessary changes to that policy. If we need to cancel that policy and reissue a new one, you would get a refund of the premium. And most of our providers don't even charge an administration fee at that point. Until the policy starts, you do have the right to cancel it.
Okay, that's cool. That's good to know.
Can I just ask, Kobe is wondering, when you're talking about stabilization, do you need to prove that? Do you need a doctor's note, or is it just a matter of, sharing that information with the insurer?
It is just a matter of sharing the information. In the event of a claim, the insurance company will go to the doctor's file. So I'm going to choose a heart condition. So let's say you're on a medication, a blood thinner for a heart condition that you've had, and it's about time, and you stop taking that blood thinner and you neglect to tell me, and I assume that you've had no changes for the full year or the 6 months, and that's the policy you've purchased. But in fact, your doctor's file notes that the change occurred 3 months before you go. If you were to have a claim for your heart and the insurance company received the doctor's file, the claim would then be denied because you don't meet the definition of stable. So it's definitely to your benefit to keep track of any changes and let the insurance company or broker know so that they can make sure you meet that definition and you know that you're covered.
Great,
So,
thank you.
To be clear though, it would just be for the heart problem that you would not be covered. If something else came up,
Correct.
you would be covered.
That's right. It's the condition that is not stable is not covered, and medical costs related directly or indirectly to that medical condition are also not covered.
Right.
The best example I have is somebody who has, say, pre-existing diabetes. Many diabetics, when they say, well, they changed my medication, oh, you know what, my diabetes is really fine, I don't need coverage. My best example is if your diabetes is not considered stable by the definition, and you get up on a chair to change a light bulb, and for whatever reason your blood sugar plummets, you fall off the chair and break your arm. When you go to the hospital, if the doctor determines that your blood sugar has dropped and that has caused you to become dizzy and fall, the medical care for your broken arm is not covered because it was caused by your diabetes, which is not stable.
Right. However, if I was cycling and I dodged a squirrel and fell off my bike and broke my arm, that would be covered.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Not that that's ever happened to me. Okay. Let me see, what else have I got? Okay, so in Canada, how is the COVID coverage happening? What are we looking at here in terms of coverage?
Most medical policies are treating COVID like any other medical condition. Where we ran into trouble was for a while, the Canadian government had a travel advisory advising Canadians to avoid all non-essential travel due to COVID. Many medical policies in the background in their terms and conditions have a clause that negates coverage when there's a travel advisory. Either it eliminates coverage in full if you choose to travel to that destination anyway, or you're not covered for medical care for the reason for the travel advisory. Many Canadian companies have allowed in Canadian clients to purchase a rider. They pay a few dollars extra and they can add the coverage in so that even if the Canadian government were to bring back that travel advisory, their policy would be unaffected. The pandemic surprised everybody. So they've done two things is, COVID is now like any other medical condition, but you're still able to provide or purchase a rider to add extra coverage to your policy. Trip cancellation and interruption, it really depends on the insurer. Some are treating it like any other pre-existing medical condition. and because there's no current travel advisory, you're still protected. Other companies are saying, well, if you get COVID and that's the reason you have to cancel, we're covering you. But if the travel advisory were to come back, we're not going to cover that. So you do have to be careful.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So any other questions there, Tracy?
Um,
Not at this point.
I think more general ones for the end.
Okay. Well, this is
Yeah.
where I'm going right now.
Okay.
Questions for both. So why don't we go right into that credit card question?
Okay. Yeah, and I can just repeat that. Just give me 1 second to scroll through here. So the question was, what does separate travel insurance offer beyond what a gold or platinum credit card or private health insurance would offer?
Yeah, so here in the US, a lot of the travel insurance policies are going to act as secondary coverage to something like a health insurance policy. However, it's worth noting that health insurance policies don't always cover you if you are traveling, say, overseas or sometimes out of state. So having something like emergency medical coverage while under a travel insurance policy is going to give you benefits that your health insurance couldn't give you. It's hard to compare credit card insurance to travel insurance policies. The credit card insurance policies are all different depending on the provider, but there are a few things to look out for. Number one, I mentioned earlier, some of those activities, and they don't even have to be high risk, adventure activities or sports, but something like going on, kind of like an easy hike, a 1 mile hike, that could be something that's excluded from credit card coverage. In some instances, credit card coverage doesn't include any emergency medical or dental. So you're on your own if you were to get hurt during your trip. A lot of times the travel insurance policies do cover things like trip cancellation or trip delay. Most credit card companies do require that your entire trip is booked on the credit card in order to use any of the trip insurance benefits. So again, just like with any insurance policy, it's worth reading the policy and understanding what's covered and what's not. I think that the main kind of takeaway from my perspective with travel insurance versus a health insurance or a credit card insurance policy is travel insurance can, in a lot of cases, fill in gaps. I think some of the, credit card insurance in particular can be a little bit bare bones. So you'll want to understand, like, what are the potential risks of the trip that you're taking? And does that credit card insurance cover me for everything that could occur? If not, consider a travel insurance policy.
Pamela, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm listening to Tara, and I don't think I can add a whole lot to that. I think for me, the biggest difference is the difficulty with which people have in getting the policy wordings to understand their credit card coverage completely. When they buy separate insurance, they get a copy of the policy wording with their documents, and it allows them to read those terms and conditions thoroughly and have a full understanding. And I think in Canada, they struggle with getting a copy of those documents. They don't seem as readily available.
And yet they're so critical. That's important
Yes.
to know what you're buying, for sure.
It's interesting because I just came back from a trip to Ireland, and before I left, just a couple months ago, I had I had purchased extended healthcare insurance, and it included travel insurance. So when I was going to travel for the first time in 2 or 3 years, I had to sit down and look at the wording of what was included in my health insurance, and then look at, as it happens, it was World Nomads that I was looking at. And what World Nomads was offering covered so much more than what my private health insurance was covering. It was a really interesting lesson, because sometimes you think, I was just talking to someone today who's going on a trip, and I asked her if she had purchased insurance, and she said, oh, I have it in my Manulife, through my work. And I said, you should probably take a look at it and see see just exactly what you're covered for.
Yeah. Travel insurance are two words that can mean many, many things.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's really important. One of the things that I look for is support, while I'm traveling, virtual care, being able to pick up a phone and talk to someone. As a matter of fact, I have to say, I was very disappointed with the insurance that I did buy when I went to France and sprained my ankle, and I could not get the medical information support that I was hoping for, expected, not just hoping for, expected, when I was away. And there's the puppy again, Karen. So I will never be using that company again. So my question is, should people check to see whether or not there is adequate, appropriate telephone support that is not just, yes, you're covered, right? But here's a physician, a medical person that can guide you through and basically triage you regardless of where you are in the world.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. That's a really important one. And in fact, we've been running surveys on our site just to get feedback from any of our site visitors around what's important to them when it comes to purchasing a travel insurance policy. And one of the top options from both US and Canadian customers over the past few months has been around 24/7 emergency assistance. So it's something that consumers want, and it's something that's really important, given the fact that you can find yourselves in, very risky, unsafe situations. I think another thing to look out for, other than 24/7 contact numbers, so that, you can't necessarily plan for something to happen to you, so you really do need to have that availability at any time. But also looking for a provider that offers multilingual service, because you might be in a country where you can't speak the language, and maybe there is that one person in the hospital that can help translate a little bit. But it's always good to have somebody on your side who can help with that translation if necessary.
Pamela?
Yeah, it's I think on the Canadian side, and being a broker, we do have a focus on support through our office. Definitely having somebody that you can turn to if you have a claim, and if you can't get a hold of the insurance company, you're not getting that service through them, having somebody to turn to in the background to advocate on your behalf is important.
So you would be a second tier. So I would first call the insurance company, and then if I'm not getting any satisfaction, I could call you as the broker.
Absolutely. And we deal with issues where, the person just can't seem to get a hold of the insurance company, the claims forms have gone awry, and they need assistance, all the way up to, well, the insurance company told me my claim was denied. What do I do now? And we will examine that denial letter, find the reasons what the insurance company is saying. And everybody is human. We have seen our client make a mistake on an application form, and we'll still advocate to see if there's something we can do to get the claim paid.
Right.
We've made a mistake in our office. I hate to admit it, but it does happen. And I've seen the insurance company make a mistake where they denied a claim initially, and then after research, we were able to say, wait a minute, no, this isn't the case. Look at your policy wordings. And the individual who was adjudicating the claim had made an error. And so having someone to turn to was just a lot of weight lifted off the shoulders.
Right. Great. So that's at the claim stage. So that's really good to know. But if I am on the road, and remembering we're solo travelers, right? And you can end up in your hotel room and not be able to, like, don't know where to turn.
Right,
And
right.
so being able to make a phone call and actually, someone saying, well, the pharmacy down the road, you can actually call them, they'll deliver this to you, or there's a doctor in the area, there's a visiting doctor, anything like that, that kind of support.
You know what? I don't believe the insurance providers we have with us have that type of support. Definitely they get advice. You get advice as to which facility to go to if you're unfamiliar with the area, which
Okay.
facility might have the care that you need. And they do very much walk you through the process. We've had clients say that, 2 days after they made the claim, they got a phone call to see how they were doing, which was really impressive. And that's something that we keep track of in our little house here to make sure that, if the clients are getting that level of service, that's definitely a company we like to recommend.
Right, a priority company. Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Let me see.
I have a few questions here.
Okay, go for it.
So the first one is, if we could go back to insurance for people over 65 or 70, whatever the cutoff is. I know that we touched on this earlier, but Victoria is wondering, are there particular companies that anyone can name that specialize in travel insurance for seniors, or how do you find the insurance that covers people after that cutoff age?
It's Victoria, you said, I think. Canadian or American?
Well, let's ask for both, because we could use the information for both.
Good point.
Canadian companies will offer insurance up to age 89 in a lot of cases.
Okay.
And in the U.S., Tara, do you have any knowledge on this front, or are we
Yes.
travelinsurance.com?
So our underwriting partner, TripMate, does have a product for travelers over the age of 70. It's a TripAssure product. So it's something that we do promote and we link to from our site for anybody that is over 70 and interested in getting coverage. Okay.
So there's an option on World Nomads as well. And then, of course, Stan's product, which is the travel insurance comparison site. And they do go up much higher as well. So there seems to be options all the way around.
Okay. Sheila would like to know if travel health insurance includes medical transport back home if it's needed.
In Canada, absolutely yes. Sorry, Tara.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, in Canada, if it is medically required, they will bring you home and your traveling companion if you're insured by the same company.
Yep, and similar within the US, something to look out for is the medical evacuation coverage, which in certain policies will be included alongside the emergency medical coverage. But yes, if you are injured or ill and you need to get treatment at home and you need to be evacuated back to your home country, that's something that would be covered.
Okay.
Okay.
What about, can I just add on to that one? What about if I'm hospitalized as a solo traveler in another country? What are the prospects of having someone brought to my bedside, so to speak? Someone from home?
Yes, that has been done in the past. I know with World Nomads, in some instances, we will send an immediate family member out there to help bring you back home. In a recent instance with one of our travelers from Iceland, one of our emergency assistance members actually went to Thailand and assisted him back to his home in Iceland. Wow. I don't know if there was a specific, maybe he didn't have an immediate family member to come help, but yeah, so we sent somebody from World Nomads to be with him and kind of help him in that flight back home.
Wow.
That's pretty great.
So can we if we find ourselves in that situation. Can we request you, Tara?
Yes, I would love that. I'm always happy to help.
I remember in Canada a few years ago, American Express did have that as part of their policy. I have no idea if they still do. I don't even know if they still offer travel insurance in Canada. But so in Canadian policies, will they send someone to the bedside or the?
Yes, it depends on each individual case, of course. Definitely, if somebody is incapacitated and medical decisions need to be made, a family member or next of kin will be flown out to assist medical staff with those decisions. And if there were a need for assistance, it would be covered.
Okay. You know, for solo travelers, this is kind of an important point to make sure that that is covered in the policy. Tracy, you've got something else, I think.
I do. Marion is asking this question about Canada, but I'm going to expand it because it's also interesting for the US, and something I've been wondering about myself, whether, so we all think about purchasing travel insurance when we're traveling internationally, maybe not so much when we're traveling domestically. So Marion is asking, are there circumstances where it's beneficial to buy medical insurance if you're traveling interprovincially in Canada? And I would, maybe Tara can speak to the same thing for the US, whether it's important to have it if you're leaving your home state but staying within the US.
In Canada, most medical costs are covered from province to the same value had that medical situation happened at home. So if you're from Manitoba and you break your leg and the medical cost from beginning to end is $10,000, but you're in Calgary, let's say, and the same broken leg is 15, you would be responsible for the difference in the medical costs. Now, there are 3 medical costs that are never covered by your home province, and that's land ambulance, which normally individuals can come up with. Air ambulance, if you have to be medevaced anywhere, that is not covered by your home province to any value, and that's expensive. You could be looking at $16,000 or more. Repatriation, if someone passes away in another province, having them brought home is not covered by your home province. And in Canada, we have a unique situation. We have one province where when you go there, they will not bill your home province for medical care. Quebec expects you to pay for that medical care up front, and when you get home, apply to your province for reimbursement. Now, you will be reimbursed, but you do have to front the costs, which can be prohibitive.
Okay.
Okay.
So going to Quebec or doing something, some sort of adventure travel where you might have to be medevaced out, it's
kind of important to have coverage.
Okay. Tara, what's the situation in the US?
Yeah, a bit similar. In some cases, travel or health insurance policies will cover travelers when they're traveling domestically out of state. But for those insurance policies that don't cover, or for those travelers that might not have insurance, health insurance policies, a travel insurance policy can help out in the case of any kind of like emergency where somebody would need medical or dental care. A lot of domestic policies will also cover different types of baggage and car rental coverage. So something to look out for. And then of course, any kind of like cancellation or interruption probably applies more if you're flying out of state, but domestically versus a road trip.
We have 3 minutes left. My goodness, that went fast. Are there any other questions there, Tracy? Anyone?
Well, Rose was curious to know whether you ever got through to your travel insurance provider when you sprained your ankle.
I did, but I did not get the support that I was looking for. And so what I did is I got into an Uber, hobbled into an Uber, and he drove me about maybe 500 meters, quarter of a kilometer to a pharmacy. So in Europe, pharmacies are incredible resources. So do remember this. And the pharmacist gave me, I can't remember, a couple of things, and but also booked me an appointment with a specialist who charged me all of 30 euros. I got the appointment that afternoon, and I went, to see him. 30 euros, and he confirmed that it was a sprain, that it was not broken, that I should be fine. He then prescribed a certain specific kind of brace, which was phenomenal, and which I wore because I was getting onto a cruise ship the next day, a river cruise the next day. I wore it, and it really, I had no problem on the ship. It was just great. So if you are not getting the information that you need, and you are in Europe and probably other places in the world, go to the pharmacy. The resort, just an incredible resource. So that's what
Okay.
it ended up happily.
And I would just add one thing that I think people don't know about. I didn't know about it. Is that your travel insurance company may be able to help you track down your luggage if it goes missing, because my luggage went missing, and I was frantic trying to figure out. I was in Italy trying to figure out who to call, where to call, how to find out where my luggage was. And then at some point I called the insurance company about something else, and discovered that they have a service where they will take over that stressful job of tracking your luggage for you. So especially right now, when so many pieces of luggage are going missing, it's a good thing to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Yep, that's for sure. It's a little bit crazy out there with the airports. Wow, it just turned 8 o'clock. Right on the wire. So unless there are any outstanding questions, like burning questions?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So I think, well, that was fantastic. That was absolutely fantastic. Terra, Pamela, you were articulate, you were concise, you were clear. This was incredible. It's not an easy thing to do around technical products like that. So thank you both very, very much.
Yeah, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
having us.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, well, thanks everyone.